Zan Rowe on Double J.
So, Welcome to My Island is track one of the album, and it's also the oldest song on that album. It was actually written towards the tail end of writing Pang. And when I wrote that song that day in the studio, I was just so frustrated by needing to write lyrics. And I wanted to just sort of explode just vocally and kind of post-verbally, or maybe even pre-verbally. And that's where that 1 minute long kind of feral, insane wail came from that opened the song. And also where the chorus lyrics, desire, I want to turn into you, also came from, was just this sort of, I guess, frustration with the kind of need to make things narrative and literal and wanting to just make them intense. And fully bodied. And when I wrote that song, I knew immediately it didn't belong on the album, but I knew it was also the beginning of something else. And it literally is. It became track one of the album. But, you know, like you said, it is a very lush album and is full of sort of twists and turns, and that song really is our starting point. It's definitely not our ending point.
No. Well, also that unfettered emotion as well. You are wailing in a kind of way that becomes almost guttural in this song. But that feeling of just total freedom and abandon inhabits the whole record. Do you like that? That's very sonic feeling of just letting go of, I guess, of spiraling upwards, downwards, sideways, whichever way?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking a lot about catharsis towards the end of the pandemic when I was beginning to write this material, and thinking a lot about these kind of symbols like volcanoes of kind of, spirals, like you said, but volcanoes especially, actually, because of, you know, the way they kind of contain pressure and then explode outward, and they're kind of faceless and chaotic and unpredictable, and, you know, the force of nature and tragedy, but also something humanity has dealt with forever, just like pandemics. And I'm actually touring now with the volcano on stage as a sort of symbol of like catharsis. But yeah, I think that's kind of was the source of that kind of expressionism you're talking about.
Does the volcano have lights in it? Is there a bit of like musical theatre going on behind you as you perform?
I mean, listen, the volcano has her own rider. She only takes blue M&Ms. She flies first class.
I mean, you got to take care of volcanoes, right? You never know when they're going to blow.
You know, that diva is going to be a diva. What can I say?
What you mentioned the pandemic there. I know that you wrote a lot of this as well and made a lot of it while you're on tour with Dua Lipa. Two very different experiences. What sort of time period, if we're talking about that opening song coming at the very end of your last record's creation and now 2023, what sort of period is this capturing in your life?
Well, for me, August 2021 was a really, really pivotal time because that was when venues reopened in LA. And I'd actually lived in London throughout the majority of the pandemic until I was sort of thrust out for visa reasons and found myself in LA living at Charlie XCX's guest bedroom. And I played my first show since the start of, you know, the world closing down. And it was at a massive amphitheater in LA, by far the biggest show I'd ever played in my life. It was sold out. And from there, I went straight into a summer of festival touring, straight into a US tour, and then straight into opening for Dua Lipa. And have actually been on the road ever since, because I went, you know, effectively right through another summer of touring, right into touring this album. So I've been on the road technically since August of 2021 and have finished the majority of this record while in transit. So I guess there's a little nod to being lost for be found in translation a bit on the album cover, with me being on the train crawling on hands and knees in the sand, because that is a bit how it felt.
I thought that was a plane. It's a train. It's an amazing cover. Like, it's pure chaos.
You know, we're in transit. We're taking it to go.
Having those shows as well, warming up the crowd for Dua Lipa, I'm imagining that you're playing to like tens of thousands of people. Did that change the way you thought about your music and your performance and your projection to the world as you were making this record?
Absolutely. And I actually found it so inspiring because, as always with a support tour, you know, their audience isn't going to know who you are. But in this case, it was like, you know, Dua's like the epitome of like princess superstar. And so I was like, okay, her fans are coming expecting to be dazzled. And I was like, how do I dazzle in a way that's just me? How do I do my own version of that level of spectacle? But of course, with a much smaller ensemble, much less going on stage. But how do I convey what I'm trying to do in 30 minutes? And it transformed me as a performer. I think the way I would move and hold myself and speak from the beginning of that tour to the end just completely changed. So, and also Duo was so much fun. Her and her crew, like, they were so warm and wonderful to us, and we had the best time. So only the best memories of touring with Dua Lipa.
Her show is amazing. I was lucky to see it in November last year, and it was just so joyful, and it looks like they're having the best time. So I'm glad that carried to offstage as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sounds that run through this beautiful record of yours. Obviously, there's your kind of wild and wonderful pop music that you make. There's Spanish guitar, there's trip hop, there's drum and bass, which is making a big comeback across music in general. It has this sort of bent nostalgia to it, which I love. What did you want to kind of convey from, I guess, your own influences and your passions in making a record that has so many different sounds, that the center is your voice, but outside of that, there's so much sonic diversity?
I mean, I've always worked this way. Even in my former band, Chairlift, our albums did kind of play out like playlists. And at the time, it kind of didn't really fit into conventions of how people made music. But I think now I've sort of caught up with culture, or vice versa, because, you know, we all have such eclectic music taste now with streaming and making playlists and sharing playlists. And I really don't feel the need to be tethered to genre, but in fact to kind of surf between genres in a way that carves out your own specific path through culture and the stuff you like. I think it's people's aggregate of their tastes that's more interesting than any one specific thing.
Yeah, and I guess the grounding anchor is your voice, isn't it? Throughout all of it, you know this is a Caroline Polachek record because it's that insane voice of yours, that incredible vocal that's holding it down. The one song that really, when I was listening to an early stream of this and I was just enjoying it so much, and then all of a sudden I was like, is that friggin' Dido? And then a second later, is that Grimes? It just hit me for six because I didn't know this was happening. But on Fly to You, another song that D&B lives so beautifully, Grimes and Dido pop up about halfway through this record. How did that come about? What's the backstory to having those two legends on your new album?
Well, I've never had a feature on any of my music before, my entire career. And so this time around, I thought it was finally time to approach it. And Grimes and I have been friends for a decade now, and just sort of crossing flight paths all over the place, and meaning to work on something for ages. And so I sent her the beginnings of Fly to You, and when that song just first began, because it had something so energetic but so smooth at the same time. Like, it was like, I don't know, like a cloud laced with amphetamines or something. And I was like, you know what? This is like Grimes's bread and butter in terms of the contradictions and the energy. It just felt like it was pink and bubbling. So I sent it to her and she loved it. And I found myself in LA shortly after, where we met up at her house and just wrote and recorded her verse together in her bedroom. And she's just such an incredible producer and so fun to watch at work. And then we both just got very excited thinking about how we could expand the song outward even more. And we loved the idea of bringing Dido in. So I wrote Dido a letter and took a picture of it, sent her a JPEG of the letter. And then a few days later, got a FaceTime from Dido, and I screamed. I was so excited. And Dido is hilarious, by the way. She's so cool and she's so funny. And really similar workflow. I went over to her house and we recorded it and wrote it, just the two of us, but she wanted to work outside. So I brought my whole home studio set up, and we set up on Dido's lawn and sang together in the sun, writing her verse. And I just had chills the first time I heard her sing, because there is only one person in the world who sings and sounds like that, and it's her.
I'm never going to listen to that song the same way again, knowing that you recorded it on Dido's lawn as the sun was shining. Guys just hanging out at her house. I read that you have a ritual where you get friends to send you images that inspire you. Is that true?
So when I go on tour, I like to ask friends to send me an inspirational picture. And then I decorate the inside of my bunk with, I call it like the best group show in the US, just pinning up all these pictures inside my bunk. And it's a really, because, you know, when you're on the bus, it's so dark, and, you know, you think about who else has slept in here. You know, it's like being in a strange hotel.
You shouldn't think about that.
You shouldn't think about that. I think about that. So I like to sort of, you know, I bring all those perfume samples, you know, and you like end up with a million perfume samples from stores. I bring them all. So every night my bunk gets a different scent. I bring a stuffed animal, and then the group show comes out of all these pictures sent from friends, and it makes me feel at home.
This is the Caroline Polachek mood board.
You know, honestly, Yeah. My favorite is when people send selfies when I ask a friend to send something inspiring and they send a picture of their face.
Yeah, I respect that energy. That's good energy.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you were making this record? Because like I said, the feeling that I get listening to it is euphoric. It's so beautiful. It's also wild and unhinged in a great way, in a free way. But when you were creating it, did you feel that freedom? Did you feel like you were kind of letting go as you were singing these songs?
In some of them, yeah. I mean, the beautiful thing about singing is it's very literally tension and release. And it's something I think about a lot, even writing phrasing is like, when you're stretching to the end of a phrase, you're running out of breath. I like that to be intentional. Like it's part of the feeling of the lyric of the phrase is actually using tension. But songs like Pretty Impossible, for example, which is track 2 on the album, I really wanted not just my voice, but the structure of that song to be as free as possible. So there are no verses in that song. There's no choruses in that song. I just enter it and I start flowing. And I wanted the way it was sung to kind of echo that feeling as well.
Did it feel cathartic once you got it out? I know that's a really kind of base question for any sort of singer, but did you feel as though there was something in you that was released and sort of let go after you'd recorded all of this?
I wish it was that easy. I wish it was that easy.
You're fixed.
I will say that it's a pleasure to sing it live. And I've been so excited to like bring it to live audiences and also to sing with people on it, that feels extremely cathartic. It's like these are really good little church songs at the Volcano Church.
Please invite me to that Volcano Church.
Oh, you're invited.
I want to ask you about one of the other early singles that we heard, which again, after, hearing Bunny as a writer and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, cool, Caroline's doing Spanish guitar now. Where's the record going to go next? Sunset is the song that I'm talking about, of course. That opening line too, it's just, you could frame it. I wear my body like an uninvited guest. You're thrown straight into this song with a line like that. And this feels like a very common theme in your music, both in the music that you've done by yourself, but also the music of Chairlift. You often have really visceral metaphors. How do you write? Like, where does this come from? Are you bouncing off the sounds that you're creating? Is it a free form where the stories and the lyrics flow in, or is it different every time?
Well, I guess the one thing that is always the same is I'm a melodic writer, so I always write melody first. And I'm fiercely loyal to the character of those early melodic takes. Like there's so much emotion and personality and also like agenda already in these melodic sketches that I like to, even things like a big plosive, like a P or a K or a T sound, the way it explodes out through a phrase, I get really faithful to those kind of hard versus soft edges from the original sketch, which of course makes the lyric writing process like miserable because it takes so long to find something that means anything that also suits those sounds. But in the case of Sunset, that song has such a sort of clear arc where you're dealing, it's about disillusionment. And in the chorus, I say no regrets because you're my sunset. And I love sunset's the ultimate cliche. And it's also like dealing with conclusion, right? There's no such thing as conclusion or resolution in real life. So I was really leaning into this sort of Ennio Morricone style Western cliche of this kind of resolution. And so you have to set up a lot of tension in the verse. And it's not hard for me to come up with examples and metaphors for tension because I think we all feel so much. So yeah, I guess that's a little peek into how these journeys come together.
Do the lyrics always have to matter? Do they always have to have meaning?
Absolutely. But do they need to make sense? No.
Great answer. Well, your music puts it all on the line every time I hear your records, whether it's the brilliant Pang or this beautiful new album, Desire I Want to Turn Into You, musically, lyrically, vocally. It just feels like you are putting your full self into this with mystery as well. Do we understand what all of it's about? Maybe not, but that's okay. Do you kind of want to always explore those vulnerabilities that we don't always get to hear in song? Is that a big part of what drives you, sharing a vulnerability of self in your music?
I think what drives me is excitement, is feeling like there's something new or risky or truthful or bold to be said or to be done. I guess I don't feel any particular loyalty to one feeling over the other, whether it's vulnerability or strength or irony or total sincerity. You know, I think it's really just about excitement and feeling at the end of the day.